After 14 years, Rockstar Games has finally released Red Dead Redemption on PC. But considering Rockstar's history with PC releases, I wouldn't blame you for being cautious about this PC port. So, was it worth the 14-year wait? In this video, we're going to compare it to emulated versions and find out. First impressions of this PC port are great. I fired it up with graphical settings maxed out and DLAA enabled, and I was getting 60 FPS on my RTX 2060 Super. But after seeing a few drops to the 50s, I switched DLAA to DLSS quality, and after that I got no more FPS drops whatsoever with no noticeable change in image quality. This was a stark contrast to some of Rockstar's past PC releases, like GTA 4 for example, which was very broken on release, or the PS2 era GTA games which still have missing or broken visual effects on PC, or even the unspeakable Definitive Edition quote-unquote remasters which are an abomination. And by the way, are sitting at mostly positive reviews on Steam? Like really guys? Come on! Anyway, 011, which was the developer of this PC port, seems to have done a great job. The game runs smoothly with no noticeable visual issues. But to be sure that there are really no visual issues, we had to compare it to other versions using emulation. And with the recently released ports, there are many versions to look at. So let's start with the Xbox 360 version running on Xenia. This, along with the PS3 version, is one of the original versions released in 2010, developed by Rockstar themselves. Normally it's locked at 720p and 30 FPS, but using the patches on the Xenia Canary version, you can unlock the resolution and frame rate, although going above 60 FPS causes bugs, something that doesn't happen on the PC version. And of course, since Xenia is an emulator, it's much heavier to run than the native PC port. Xenia is also specifically heavy on the GPU, so my RTX 2060 Super can barely reach 30 FPS at 1440p, let alone 4K. But performance aside, let's look at the visual differences. On Xenia, the game has a noticeable difference in lighting compared to the other versions. In some scenes, Xenia can look much brighter. It also seems to have different color grading, with more contrast in most scenes, and sometimes slightly different color tones. Shadow filtering is also noticeably worse on Xenia, while the PC version has the best shadow quality due to its use of contact hardening soft shadows. Another area where the PC version excels at is the draw distance. In this scene, you can really see how insanely far the draw distance on PC is compared to the old versions. There's also a bug on Xenia where the sun's lens flare appears even through walls. And finally, I noticed something which I believe to be a bug on the PC version. During cutscenes, when the camera is indoors, the environment outside appears darker than it should, compared to the other versions. Now let's look at the PS3 version running on RPCS3. The PS3 version originally ran locked at 640p and 30 FPS, but like on Xenia, you can unlock the resolution and frame rate on RPCS3. The emulation is also pretty heavy on RPCS3, but this time it's heavier on the CPU rather than GPU. My Ryzen 5700X3D suffers due to the low clock speeds, and as a result it struggles to go past 30 FPS even at 640p, sometimes dropping even way below that. In terms of visual differences, this version's color grading and lighting are much more similar to the PC version, although it can still look slightly brighter in some scenes. Shadow filtering is better than Xenia, but still inferior than the PC version. The texture quality seems to be slightly inferior on the PS3 version, even when compared to the Xbox 360 version on Xenia. The PC port doesn't seem to have improved textures when compared to most other versions. It's the PS3 version that seems to be the outlier here. Now, this version highlights two downsides of the PC port. The first one is that the multiplayer mode was removed from the recently released ports made by 011. On the other hand, you can still play the multiplayer mode on RPCS3. The other thing this version highlights is more subtle. It's a problem that I believe is present in many Rage Engine games. When the game runs at 60 FPS or more, during cutscenes, the animations and camera movement sometimes have improper pacing. The PS3 version running on RPCS3 seemed to be the only version that didn't have this problem, on the few moments where my PC was able to reach 60 FPS on it. This can be a little hard to see, so I slowed the footage down a lot here. Pay attention to the character movement. Notice how smoother it is on RPCS3 and how juddery it is on PC. So yeah, despite everything, RPCS3 still has a couple of advantages over the PC port. Next, let's look at the Switch version. Obviously, Nintendo has recently shut down both Ryujinx and Yuzu, the Switch emulators, but Red Dead Redemption is playable on the last builds of both emulators. So out of curiosity, let's compare them to the PC port. The Switch version was also developed by Double 11, so naturally is pretty similar to the PC port. On Switch, it's once again limited to 30 FPS and 720p or 1080p when docked, but both emulators allow you to unlock the frame rate and resolution without problems. In terms of performance, both Switch emulators run significantly better than Xenia and RPCS3, but Yuzu is slightly heavier than Ryujinx on the GPU, and as a result, Yuzu had a few more FPS drops than Ryujinx when running at 4K 60 on my PC. As for visual differences, between the Switch emulators, obviously there are none. Compared to the PC port, there aren't many differences either, as expected. It's mostly down to the improvements on the PC version, like the shadow quality, which is higher on PC, and the draw distance. But the Switch version doesn't have that bug mentioned earlier, where the environments outside look darker than they should. Finally, there's one last version I wanted to test, the PlayStation 4 version, which was also developed by Double 11. I tried running it on Shad PS4, but as you can see, development on this emulator is still too early, and the game is far from playable. So, after all the comparisons, I think it's safe to say that this PC port is now the best way to play Red Dead Redemption on PC or anywhere else. There are some minor things to be considered, like the animation pacing and cutscenes, or the bug with lighting outdoors, and there are also some major things, like the lack of multiplayer or the price, but I think overall this is the best experience you can get with Red Dead Redemption. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe for more. If you want to get in touch with me, follow me on X. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
What's going on here?
I got me one of them Williamson boys.
I got me one of them idiots who give marshals a bad name.
Jonah, put your gun down.